Hank Schrader figures out Heisenberg while sitting on a toilet. Not in a raid, not in a lab. On the can at a family barbecue, casually flipping through a copy of Leaves of Grass. That's the moment it finally clicks that his mild, awkward brother-in-law Walter White is the meth kingpin he's been chasing for years. Think about it. After cartel shootouts, blown-up nursing homes, and literal explosions in the desert, the big breakthrough comes from bathroom reading. He opens the book. He sees the handwriting. To my other favorite WW, and suddenly every scattered clue, every suspicious detail, every joke he ever made about Heisenberg slams together in his head. The show plays it as shock, but here's the thing. By that point, Hank had already stood next to Heisenberg dozens of times. He'd eaten his food, drunk his beer, used his bathroom. He'd even held evidence that basically pointed right at Walt's bald head. So the real question is not, how did Hank catch Heisenberg? It's how did he miss him for so long when the guy was literally in his living room? How does the sharp, relentless DEA agent who tracks down cartel assassins completely whiff on the chemistry teacher cooking blue meth under his nose? On paper, Hank is the last person who should miss this. He's the guy who follows honey threads. A gas mask in the desert, a single bullet casing, a weird pattern of blue product on the street. He's funny, loud, a little crude, but he's also methodical and incredibly good at his job. Yet when it comes to Walt, he has a total blind spot. To be fair, that blind spot is wrapped in family dinners, baby showers, and backyard barbecues. But still, another missed opportunity, and then another and another. He sees Walt as weak, as harmless, as the pathetic brother-in-law he can drag along on a ride-along for fun. That macho perception, that ego, becomes the filter for everything. If Walt seems nervous, Hank reads it as cowardice, not guilt. If Walt says something oddly specific about meth, Hank laughs it off as trivia, not a confession. Hear me out. Once you start tracking that bias, it's kind of shocking how obvious some of the clues look in hindsight. In this video, we're going to walk through every major clue Hank encounters, in order. From the pilot ride, along where Walt stares way too hard at a meth lab, to the missing lab equipment and gas masks from his school, to the RV investigation where Hank is one door away from catching Walt and Jesse in their rolling super lab. We'll look at Gail's notebook, the WW, line Hank literally jokes about out loud, Badger's description of an older bald Heisenberg, the fake Heisenberg arrest with Walt standing right there. Some of these are tiny red flags. Some are basically neon signs. All of them get rationalized away. By the end, we'll see that Hank doesn't just get close to Heisenberg once. He keeps circling the truth over and over, only to turn away at the last second. So let's rewind all the way back to that birthday party, that first ride along, and watch the clues start piling up. So when we rewind to that birthday party, it's not just a cute character intro. It's the origin of Hank's blind spot. Hank's the loud, confident DEA guy, beer in hand, bragging about seizing drug money on TV. Walt is the quiet, underpaid chemistry teacher washing dishes and pouring champagne. One is the action hero in the room. The other is the punchline. That power imbalance doesn't just make for awkward small talk. It becomes Hank's default lens for who Walter White is allowed to be. Think about it. Hank literally jokes about the easy money in meth right in front of Walt, basically handing him the business idea, and it never even crosses his mind that this meek suburban dad could act on it. At the time, Hank files Walt under harmless and never updates the file. That's the problem. Here's the thing, Hank actually is a sharp investigator. He reads people, he trusts his gut, and most of the time, that gut is dead on. But his mental model of who cooks meth, it's all cartel guys, ex-cons, street dealers, Jesse Pinkman types. Not a middle-aged chemistry teacher with a mortgage and parent-teacher conferences. Even when the chemistry angle becomes painfully obvious in hindsight, his brain just refuses to plug Walt into that equation. So that's the framework for this whole breakdown. We're going to move chronologically through the series and watch how this one bias quietly shapes every decision Hank makes. Early on, the clues are tiny coincidences. Walt wanting to tag along on a DEA raid, Walt being oddly fascinated by the meth lab, a gas mask found in the desert that just happens to come from Walt's school. You can almost forgive Hank for brushing those off, right? But as we go, those little coincidences turn into screaming red flags. The missing chemistry equipment. The RV that's basically a rolling lab. The way Walt's disappearances line up a little too neatly with Heisenberg's activity. Some of these are subtle and understandable misses. Others are the kind of obvious, in-your-face clues that make you want to yell at the screen. To be fair, some context matters. Hank is juggling cartel wars, office politics, and his own trauma. He doesn't have the luxury of obsessing over every odd behavior from his brother-in-law. But still, another missed opportunity is another missed opportunity. When that gas mask is traced back to Walt's school and Hank doesn't seriously cross-check staff when he's hunting an RV lab and never imagines Walt could be inside, those aren't just random oversights. They're filtered by his belief that family is off-limits as suspects. And that's the core tragedy for Hank. His greatest strength, his gut-level confidence, that swastering certainty, turns into his greatest weakness with Walter. He trusts his read on Walt so completely that he never questions it. Hear me out. Hank will second-guess cartel intel before he ever second-guesses the idea that his pathetic, nerdy brother-in-law might be the criminal mastermind he's chasing. From here on, every clue we cover sits under that shadow. The evidence gets louder. Hank's bias stays the same. And in the next section, you'll see how those early forgivable misses start snowballing into near misses that almost crack the case wide open. The ride-along. This is where everything quietly detonates. Not with a gunfight or a cartel hit, but with a birthday joke and a bad decision. We go back to Walt's 50th. Hank's on the couch, beer in hand, bragging about a meth bust on the news. He cracks that line about easy money in the drug game, waves the stack of cash like it's a party trick, and then casually says, "Sure, Walt can tag along on a raid sometime." To Hank, it's just flexing for the family. But think about it. He's basically handing a broke, underpaid chemistry teacher a blueprint. Crime, chemistry, cash, all in one scene. Here's the thing. At the time, Hank reads Walt exactly how he always will. Weak, harmless, a little pathetic. The guy who can't even fire a gun at the barbecue. So when Walt leans in, eyes locked on that money, Hank doesn't clock it as a red flag. He sees a midlife crisis, not the birth of Heisenberg. Cut to the ride-along itself. Hank's in his element now. He's amped, cracking jokes with Gomez, talking about bringing the bad guys to justice. The bust is Jesse's house. From Hank's perspective, this is routine. Kick in the door, yell DA, drag some loser in his underwear out into the yard. Another day, another win. But the camera keeps cutting back to Walt in the car, silent, watching, studying. While Hank's adrenaline is spiking, Walt is doing chemistry in his head. He sees the quality of the meth, hears about the mysterious cook behind it, learns how the DEA moves, how they surveil, where they look and where they don't. It's a free seminar in the meth trade, front row seat, courtesy of Agent Schrader. To be fair, Hank isn't paid to psychoanalyze his brother-in-law's soul in that moment. He's paid to cuff Jesse Pinkman and log evidence. But still, another missed opportunity. He never stops to ask the obvious suspicious question later. Why did Walt want to come so badly? And why did he fixate on seeing the lab and the money instead of the justice part? Hear me out. This is clue zero. Before the gas mask, before the RV, before Gail's notebook. Hank literally takes Walt to the front line of the blue meth operation and walks him through the DEA response, step by step. And his bias is so strong that the idea of Walt crossing that line doesn't even flicker in his brain. It's not that he considers it and dismisses it. It never exists as a possibility. And the irony? The very first cook site Hank raids out in the desert, the one where he finds that lab equipment and the gas mask traced back to Walt's school, is already tied straight into Walt's new secret life. Two worlds colliding in the sand. Hank standing in the middle, and he still won't see who's actually standing right beside him. Because the next clue he misses? It's not out in the desert. It's sitting in his own evidence chain, wearing a Letterman jacket and flunking chemistry. The gas mask in the desert. This is Hank's first real brush with Heisenberg's world, and he doesn't even realize he's touched it. You know the scene, sun-bleached sand, an RV that's just vanished, and the faint smell of chemistry hanging in the air. The crime scene. The RV tracks are still fresh, winding out into nowhere. There's a weird chemical odor, the kind that tells you something serious was cooked out here, not just a couple of kids lighting fireworks. And then, lying in the dirt like a dropped signature, is that gas mask. Hank's guys bag it, tag it, and suddenly we're not just talking about rumors of blue meth on the street anymore. We're looking at physical evidence from the very first cook Walt and Jesse ever did. Here's the thing. This isn't just some random piece of trash. When the investigation runs the serial number, it leads straight back to a public high school chemistry lab. Walt's high school. On paper. Officially. Hank literally has documentation that connects a piece of professional-grade cook equipment from a meth site to the exact place where his brother in law teaches chemistry. Think about it, and what does Hank do with that? He shrugs it off as a minor theft report. In his mind, this is a small-time clue about some stolen lab gear, not a flashing red flag that someone at the school might be involved in high-level meth production. To be fair, at the time he's chasing street dealers and local distributors, not imagining a suburban teacher in a beige jacket masterminding 99% pure. But here's the thing, Hank's reaction exposes his blind spot. He immediately jumps to the easiest story. A student stole it, maybe a janitor. Some punk grabbed a mask for kicks and it ended up in the desert. He never even entertains the idea that a chemistry teacher, someone with actual expertise, might be using that equipment. The assumption is so automatic it's almost funny. He has a literal cook tool tied to Walt's workplace and still doesn't put chemist and meth in the same mental sentence. Hear me out. This is the first big "how did you miss this" moment. On its own, the gas mask is suspicious but not definitive. Combined with the RV tracks, the chemical smell, and the emerging legend of ultra-pure blue meth, it starts to look a lot more obvious in hindsight. Yet Hank's mental shortcut saves Walt. Again, he files it under petty theft and moves on. And that's another missed opportunity that's going to echo. Because this isn't the last time the school pops up in his evidence chain. The gas mask is just the opening act. The missing lab equipment, the inventory checks, and the pattern around that chemistry department, that's where the school connection is going to come roaring back, even closer to Walt himself. The missing lab gear. This is where the school stops being background scenery and quietly turns into a crime scene. And the wild part is, Hank is literally walked right up to that line and then just shrugs. The report is simple on paper. The chemistry department at Walt's high school flags missing equipment. Beakers, flasks, high-end glassware that your average teenager wouldn't even know how to use. And then the big one, a respirator gas mask signed out from the storeroom. Not just gone, but later found at a dessert cook site connected to the new blue meth. Think about it. You've got a gas mask with a school inventory tag sitting in the dirt next to professional-grade product. Hank gets told exactly what this means. Someone with access to the chemistry storeroom is stealing specialized gear. That's not a janitor swiping paper towels. That's somebody who knows which pieces matter for a serious cook. But here's the thing. Hank treats it like a sitcom subplot. He jokes with the faculty about kids cooking meth, tosses off a line about breaking into the lab, and then moves on like it's just low-level mischief. To be fair, at the time he's juggling cartel violence, turf wars, and a mysterious new player in the market. Compared to that, a few missing flasks look tiny. But still, another missed opportunity. Never orders a real internal audit. No deep dive on who has keys, who checked out what, which teachers could actually run a sophisticated lab. He doesn't even seriously sit down with the one guy everyone knows is a chemistry genius, Walter White. Run the chain of clues Hank never connects. Blue meth appears in his jurisdiction, purer than anything on the street. A gas mask from Walt's school is recovered at a cook site tied to that same blue meth. The school then reports high-grade lab gear missing from the exact department where Walt works every day. That's not subtle, that's a neon sign. So why doesn't Hank ask the obvious question? Which adult chemist has the access and the brains to pull this off? Because in his head, meth cooks are street-level dirtbags, not middle-aged teachers with PhDs and family barbecues. His stereotype of the criminal doesn't include someone like Walt, so his brain just never puts Walt in the suspect pool. Hear me out. If that same gas mask had come from a community college chem lab run by some sketchy adjunct he didn't know personally, Hank would have been all over it, and this pattern doesn't stop here. Hank will keep holding puzzle pieces without assembling them. The school connection, Jesse Pinkman, the mysterious second cell phone, each one lands in his lap as a separate clue. The problem is, he never realizes they're all orbiting the same quiet, harmless chemistry teacher, sitting at his family dinner table. The Jesse connection. This is the one that hurts when you replay it. Because Hank doesn't just brush past a clue here. He basically steps over a neon sign that says, local meth cook with a chemistry teacher in his past. Go back to the very beginning. The bust on Emilio and Crazy 8. Hank kicks in the door, does his DEA thing, and chaos erupts. Emilio gets cuffed. Someone bolts out the window. Later, Hank's standing in the yard, looking up at that rooftop escape route, and they put a name to the ghost who ran. Jesse Pinkman, street name, Captain Cook. At the time, it's simple. Small-time meth cook, Cheap pseudo, a little red phosphorus magic, nothing special. He goes into Hank's files as just another low-level criminal in a sea of low-level criminals. But here's the thing, that rooftop ghost is already half of Heisenberg's operation. Cut to the marijuana talk. Hank thinks he's doing a favor for the family. Walt Jr. might be smoking weed, so the cool Uncle DEA agent shows up with a scare-straight speech and a confiscated joint. He pulls Walt aside in the bedroom and asks the awkward question, "Who do you think your kid is getting this from?" And Walt, scrambling to deflect suspicion from his own double life, casually drops a name, Jesse Pinkman. Hear me out. In about 10 seconds, Hank learns two crucial facts. 1. Jesse Pinkman is connected to drugs again, this time as Walt's supposed dealer. 2. Jesse Pinkman is not just some random punk on the street. He's Walter White's former student. The guy Hank just tagged as Captain Cook? He used to sit in Walt's chemistry class. That's huge. On paper, that's an obvious red flag. A known meth cook with a direct link to a highly qualified chemist. A chemist whose school just mysteriously lost lab equipment and gas masks. Think about it. If this were any other chem teacher, any other suspect, Hank would be drawing lines and circles on a whiteboard, but Hank laughs it off. To be fair, from his perspective, it feels like a funny coincidence. The idea of Walt teaming up with this burnout former student is absurd. Walt is the straight arrow teacher, the guy who can barely pump his own gas without looking exhausted. Jesse is the clown who jumped off a roof in his underwear. Partnership? It doesn't even register as a possibility. And because it doesn't fit Hank's picture of Walt, he never revisits it. Even as the blue meth case explodes, even as Jesse's name keeps popping up around Tuco, around the RV, around Badger, Hank treats Jesse and Heisenberg like two separate puzzles. Jesse is a lead, Heisenberg is a legend, Walt is family. But still, another missed opportunity. Hank will eventually chase Jesse hard, convinced that this kid is the key to Heisenberg. What he never realizes is that he already had the key years earlier. A scared former student and his quiet, disappointed chemistry teacher. And the next time Jesse shows up in Hank's investigation, that buried connection is going to make Hank's blind spot even more dangerous. The blue meth. This is the second giant red flag Hank stares at for years without asking the most obvious question. Not who's selling this, but who could even make this? From the very first briefings, the DEA treats the blue stuff like an alien artifact. Unusual color, 90+% purity. It's instantly destabilizing the local market because every other cook suddenly looks amateur by comparison. Hank's in those meetings cracking jokes, but you can see it. He knows this product is on another level. This isn't bathtub crank. This is a signature. And to be fair, Hank does clock how special it is. He coins the myth. He's the one who starts talking about a mysterious mastermind, a ghost in the criminal underworld, Heisenberg. In Hank's head, that name fits the product. Cold, calculating, dangerous. The chemistry is so advanced that he automatically imagines some shadowy cartel chemist or a desert rat supercook. Someone hard, someone mean. Definitely not his shy brother-in-law, who can't even fire a gun at a rock. But here's the thing. The science itself is screaming a different story. 99% purity, consistent batches, a unique blue tint that isn't just food coloring, that's not a lucky cook. That's a trained chemist with serious theoretical knowledge and access to proper equipment. You don't stumble into that. You design it. Think about it. Hank already knows, from the gas mask at the first desert cook site, that at least some of this operation is tied to a high school chemistry lab. He literally traces that mass back to Walt's school. That's an insane clue. Yet even with blue meth that looks like it rolled off a pharmaceutical assembly line, Hank never sits down and says, okay, which local chemist has the brains and the access to pull this off? The question of who could cook this just kind of floats in the background. Instead, Hank's focus locks onto distribution. Street dealers, Tuco, the cousins, then Gus and the cartel. His caseboard fills up with faces, corners, routes, but not resumes. He's brilliant at mapping networks, but he never audits the talent. Who's actually behind the beakers? It's oddly underexplored for a guy obsessed with this product. And that's where the irony gets brutal, because Hank will literally stand in his living room, blue meth evidence on his mind, and walk Walter White through the Heisenberg investigation. He shows Walt the caseboard. He explains the purity, the color, the whole legend he's built around this invisible chemist. Walt nods along like a fascinated bystander, while being the man who engineered the entire formula. Hear me out. This is the purest snapshot of Hank's blind spot. The blue meth tells him genius chemist. His own evidence tells him local school equipment. His instincts tell him mastermind, not a fluke. But still, another missed opportunity, because the one person who fits that profile perfectly is the last one he's willing to see. And when someone finally shows up who almost fits Hank's mental image of Heisenberg, Hank will grab onto him so hard that he misses the even bigger clue hiding right behind that decoy. And that decoy? It lands right in Hank's lap because of who he thinks the real Heisenberg could never be. To see why that blind spot is so strong, you have to go back to the living room, not the lab. The birthday party. The first big clue is actually a vibe. Hank's on the couch, beer in hand, flexing his DEA stories for the family while Walt stands there in his beige sweater, looking like the human version of decaf. Hank jokes about easy money in meth, waves the TV camera around, and you can feel it. In his mind, Walt is the guy you tease, not the guy you tail. That dynamic locks in early. Then you get the desert shooting trip. Hank hands Walt a gun and treats it like a joke, like giving your nerdy brother-in-law a toy he's clearly not built for. He laughs when Walt can't handle the recoil. Walt is the harmless science teacher trying to play cowboy. Think about it. This is literally Hank putting a weapon in Heisenberg's hands and still reading him as soft. That's not just a scene, that's a mental file labeled non-a-threat. Here's the thing about Hank's attitude. It's not just friendly, it's protective. He has this big brother energy with Walt, always stepping in, always talking over him, always reassuring Skyler that he'll take care of things. Walt isn't someone you investigate, he's someone you babysit. So when Hank later builds his Heisenberg profile, ruthless, calculating, dangerous, the profile and Mr. White from Family Dinner simply cannot overlap in his head. So when Walt starts acting weird, Hank's filter is already set. Walt disappears for hours. He lies about car washes and late nights. He suddenly pushes back, like at that awkward poolside moment when he defends Heisenberg and undercuts Hank's Gale theory. For any other guy, that's suspicious. For Walt? To be fair, Hank just reads it as a midlife crisis mixed with chemo rage. Hear me out. Hank actually gets multiple red flags. The second cell phone argument, the strange cash flow jokes, Skyler's tension, Walt's new confidence and random bursts of arrogance. Any one of these, on a stranger, would ping Hank's instincts. But because this is family, the story in his head is, poor Walt is cracking under pressure, not maybe Walt is the pressure, and that story protects more than Walt, it protects Hank. His whole identity is built on being the guy who keeps his family safe from monsters out there. Admitting that the monster might be sitting across the table, cutting his son's birthday bacon, that would shatter the image. So without realizing it, Hank starts unconsciously editing out any clue that points to Walt. If a piece of evidence threatens that core belief, his brain files it under coincidence and moves on. But here's the thing, Walt sees this. He studies Hank's blind spot and turns it into armor. When we get to the RV stakeout, and later that fake emergency call about Marie, you're going to see Walt weaponize Hank's protective instincts against him in real time. Hank won't just miss the RV, he'll miss the man he literally taught how to shoot, the second cell phone. This is Hank's first real crack in the image of harmless Walt. And, again, he's standing right there as the clue explodes in the middle of a hospital room. We're in season 2, after Walt's fugue state. He's naked in a supermarket, he doesn't remember where he's been, and everyone is walking on eggshells. At the hospital, Skyler finally snaps and confronts him about a second cell phone, not a vague suspicion. She says it out loud, in front of family. Marie, Walt Jr., and Hank all watch this super personal, super suspicious fight unfold. Think about it. Walt's wife is accusing him of lying about where he's been and hiding an entire second phone, right after he vanished for days. To any investigator, that's a massive red flag. Secret phones are what? The most obvious symbol of a double life. Hank picks up on the weirdness instantly. You can see it in the way he looks at Walt, the way he tries to crack jokes, but keeps glancing back and forth between them. He's clocking Skyler's mistrust, Walt's evasive answers, the tension that's way too intense to be just cancer stress. For a second, you can feel him entertain the idea that Walt is lying about more than he's admitting. The domestic mask slips. But here's the thing, Hank's brain autofills the explanation with the safest possible option, cheating. Midlife crisis, maybe some porn on the side. He even leans into these jokes because framing Walt as a bumbling, maybe unfaithful husband is still less threatening than imagining him as a criminal mastermind coordinating drug runs. To be fair, that's what most people would think. Secret phone plus weird behavior usually equals infidelity, not my brother-in-law as Heisenberg. But Hank isn't most people. He's a DEA agent. He has full legal access to phone records, financials, surveillance tools. If anyone in that room is equipped to ask, wait, what if this is something bigger? It's him. Hear me out. Imagine Hank quietly pulling Walt's phone records the next day. He doesn't even have to accuse him, just runs the numbers, checks call patterns, sees strange activity lining up with known drug events, maybe even hits Jesse's phone. Or he flags Walt's finances, watches the sudden cash flow that doesn't match a high school teacher's salary. At the time, Walt's operation is still small, fragile, and sloppier than he'll ever be again. A little pressure here and the whole thing cracks. Instead, Hank does what he always does with Walt. He files it under harmless personal drama and lets it cool. Once Skylar stops openly accusing Walt, Hank assumes the problem is resolved. No follow-up, no records check, no quiet tale on Walt's car. And just like that, another missed opportunity disappears. The second cell phone should have been Hank's first real investigative pivot. Instead, it becomes background noise, setting the stage for the much bigger domestic explosions later. Like Skylar kicking Walt out and sending the kids to Hank and Marie, which he'll also underestimate until it's almost too late. So while Hank is shrugging off the second cell phone, something else starts changing in the background. The money. Quietly at first, then all at once. The medical bills, the chemo, the experimental treatments. On a high school chemistry teacher's salary and a part-time car wash job that barely covered groceries. At the time, the show makes you feel the financial pressure. But think about it from Hank's perspective. He literally works in a world where sudden access to cash is an obvious red flag. And yet, when the money problem mysteriously stops being a problem, Hank doesn't even flinch. We see the Whites talking about bills less. Walt's paying for things. Skylar isn't panicking over every statement. Then you get those scenes where they're openly discussing buying the car wash. Buying it. Not just clocking in for shifts anymore. And Hank is right there in this period, visiting, making jokes, eating dinner. The vibe is, hey, Walt finally caught a break. No one asks how big that break actually is. Here's the thing. Hank knows what dirty money looks like. He has literally kicked indoors on guys who went from broke to I own a business now overnight. Cash businesses, car washes, nail salons, fried chicken joints. He's seen every version of that playbook. So when Walt and Skylar suddenly have the funds to purchase the exact car wash Walt used to complain about, that should look textbook suspicious. The overqualified chemistry teacher with cancer, who just had his financial life destroyed, now owns a perfect laundering front. You don't need a wallboard and red string to see the pattern. Instead, Hank gets the gambling winnings story and just rolls with it. He laughs. He teases Walt. He even helps sell the lie to Marie. To be fair, it's a ridiculous cover story, but that's exactly why it works. It fits his narrative. In Hank's head, Walt is too weak, too pathetic, too honest to be a meth kingpin. A secret gambling habit? Embarrassing, sad, but safe, that he can process. And notice how he never does the cop thing with it. No follow-up questions. No, where'd you play? How much did you actually win? You file taxes on that? He never runs Walt's name through any database, never checks casino reports, never thinks, hey, maybe I should verify this giant unexplained influx of cash connected to my brother-in-law, living in the middle of my biggest drug investigation. But still, another missed opportunity. Hear me out. This is where Hank's professional brain completely shuts off at the family line. The same guy who could walk into a random strip mall and smell money laundering can't see it when it's literally gift, wrapped as a car wash with a former cancer patient owner. And that blind spot is going to hurt a lot more later. Because when Hank ends up in a hospital bed, broke, traumatized, and desperate after being shot, the money angle comes back. Only this time, Walt's cash isn't just suspicious background noise. It's the lifeline Hank doesn't realize is poisoned yet. But that poisoned lifeline doesn't start with barrels in the desert or car washes full of cash. It starts with something way dumber. An old beat-up RV, the RV. This is Hank's first real brush with Heisenberg's lab, even if at the time, he just calls it a rolling meth lab. He doesn't know it yet, but the second he hears those words, he's basically being handed a blueprint to Walt's double life. Hank first hears about it through the blue. The product is on the street. It's purer than anything he's seen, and informants keep mentioning the same detail, some kind of RV out in the desert. Not a cartel super lab, not a warehouse, a recreational vehicle. To be fair, if you're Hank, that sounds like a couple of low-rent tweakers with a hot plate, not a chemistry genius rewriting the meth game. But here's the thing, the clues start lining up fast. You've got vague sightings of an RV parked way out where no one camps. You've got dealers talking about cooks who show up, make a batch, and vanish. You've got that gas mask found at the original cook site that traces back to Walt's school. Hank is basically circling the right answer with a highlighter and still not seeing it. He starts building this mental picture of Heisenberg's setup, mobile operation, desert cooks, someone smart enough to avoid fixed locations, and Hank is right about all of that. He correctly intuits that the RV isn't just transportation, it's the heart of the operation, the lab itself. But when he imagines who's inside, he sees hardened criminals, cartel-type guys, maybe some ex-cons. Not his overqualified brother-in-law and a burnout former student who used to fail chemistry quizzes. Think about it. The image of a rusty RV actually helps Walt. The more amateurish the exterior looks, the easier it is for Hank to downgrade it in his head. It feels small time, it feels sloppy. So even when Hank treats the RV as a key target, he still underestimates the sophistication of what's happening inside. Another missed opportunity. Pattern interrupt. If that RV had been a high-tech trailer with security cameras and ventilation systems, do you really think Hank wouldn't have kicked down every door in Albuquerque to find it? The joke is that Walt's bargain bin choice is exactly what lets him play in the big leagues, while looking like a little league coach. And all of this is quietly setting up one of Hank's closest calls. Because this rolling lab he's chasing in theory, he is going to stand inches away from it in that junkyard, gun drawn, breathing the same air as Heisenberg's equipment, and still walk away empty-handed. Hear me out. That junkyard scene isn't just tense TV, it's the physical embodiment of Hank's blind spot. The evidence is right there, metal walls away, and he still can't imagine Walt on the other side. When we get to that moment, every early clue about the RV is going to sting a lot more, because by then it's obvious the RV wasn't just a lead. It was Hank's best shot at ripping the mask off Heisenberg years before that bathroom reveal. The methylamine heist video. This is one of the loudest silent alarms in the entire show. Hank watches it, rewinds it, analyzes it, and somehow never hears what it's screaming. You remember the setup. Walt and Jesse need a huge upgrade, real industrial-grade methylamine. No more jugs from the supply closet, so they hit that warehouse. Two guys in ski masks, reflective vests, pretending to be maintenance. They unbolt a single barrel, slap it onto a rolling pallet, and then pull off that ridiculous but genius rolling magnet trick to get it into the truck. It's clumsy, it's desperate, but it works. And of course, the whole thing is caught on camera. Multiple angles, grainy but usable. That footage lands right on Hank's desk as part of the blue meth investigation. This isn't some random side case. It's directly connected to the product he's obsessed with. What does the video actually show? Two masked figures, clearly organized, moving with a plan. They're not smashing and grabbing. They know exactly which barrel to take. They know how to bypass the loading dock. They improvise with that magnet in a way that screams. Somebody here understands physics and leverage. It's evident this isn't street-level thinking, this is problem-solving. And the target itself is a clue, not cash, not TVs, not guns, methylamine. A very specific chemical that just so happens to be perfect for large-scale meth production. The moment Hank links that theft to the blue meth on the street, it should tell him something huge. Heisenberg's operation is scaling up. This is industrial now. But here's the thing. Hank studies the footage like a cop, not like someone who might know the mastermind personally. He pauses on the way they move the barrel. He talks logistics. He connects it to the superior quality of the blue meth. He treats the thieves as abstract criminals, not as people who might live in his own zip code. Think about it. A clever, science-based theft involving specialized chemicals in Albuquerque, right when his brother-in-law, a chemistry teacher, suddenly has money and weird absences. That combination should be at least a tiny red flag. To be fair, the masks do a lot of work. The video never gives him a clear face, no obvious voice, but still, another missed opportunity. Hank never even flirts with the idea that the brains behind this heist might be Walt. The question just doesn't occur to him. What makes this even better is that the show brings that same footage back in Season 5. After the WW revelation, Hank reopens old files, and we watch him rewatch that heist. Same pixels, same angles, different Hank. Now every movement looks suspicious, every clever workaround feels personal. Hear me out, that's the theme in one scene. The evidence doesn't change, only the lens does. At the time, Hank's lens is warped by his belief that Walt is weak and harmless, so the video is just another cartel-style job. Later, once Heisenberg has a name and a face, that same clip becomes a retroactive confession. And this isn't the only piece of tape that plays differently once you know who Walt really is. The next clue Hank stares straight at is even more personal, because this time, Heisenberg isn't just a blur on a monitor. He's standing right next to him, the hospital elevator. This is Hank at his most broken and his most dangerous. He's just gunned down the Salamanca cousins in a parking lot ambush. He's bleeding, he's shaking, and yet his brain is still doing what it always does, scanning for threats. Think about it. The doors close, the elevator starts moving, and Hank clocks every single person in that cramped metal box. The nurse, the orderly, the guy who looks a little too interested. We watch the camera linger on faces because Hank is doing the same thing in his head, running profiles, calculating angles, waiting for the next cartel hit that feels almost inevitable after what just happened. His hands are trembling, but his instincts are razor sharp. This is the same guy who smelled something off about Tortuga, long before the tortoise bomb, who knew the cousins weren't just random psychos, but part of a larger pattern of cartel escalation. With cartel players, Hank reads danger and deception with almost supernatural accuracy. He sees the boots, the tattoos, the prayer rituals, and instantly understands, on a gut level, what kind of game he's in. Here's the thing. In that elevator, Hank is traumatized, but he's still hunting. He's hyper-aware of exits, of who might be armed, of how vulnerable he is in that tiny space. His paranoia is actually justified. At the time, the cartel really is trying to erase him. So his gut is screaming, and for once it's completely right. Now compare that to how he treats Walt. Same city, same time frame, same brain, totally different settings. Walt is disappearing for hours, lying about treatments, acting cagey about money, and dropping suspicious little red flags all over the place. Second cell phone, random fugue state, sudden, weird confidence around criminals. Any one of these would put a street-level dealer on Hank's radar, but when it's Walt? Nothing, the radar just doesn't ping. To be fair, family is supposed to get some benefit of the doubt. But Hank doesn't just give Walt a pass. He practically builds an entire persona for him. Weak, harmless, pathetic. The harmless chemistry teacher who can barely pump gas without supervision. Once Hank slaps that label on, his legendary instincts selectively shut off. Hear me out, the gut that spots cartel danger from a glance in an elevator suddenly can't see the obvious coincidence of Walt's absences lining up with every major Heisenberg event. So Hank's gut isn't broken, it's biased. It's like he's running two different operating systems. One for the job, where every clue matters, and one for home, where he filters out anything that contradicts Walt the loser. And that split is exactly what's going to drag him right to the edge of the truth, without letting him cross it. Because when that RV shows up on his radar, those two versions of Hank collide. The brilliant investigator and the blind brother-in-law end up in the same junkyard, staring at the same rolling meth lab, with Walt inches away. The RV junkyard standoff. This is the moment Hank doesn't just brush up against Walt's double life. He puts his hand on the door of Heisenberg's lab and still walks away. We're at Old Joe's junkyard. Dust, rusted cars, that giant yellow crusher in the background. Hank has tracked the RV here off Jesse's registration. He's amped up on adrenaline, and he rolls in like a one-man raid. Gun out, jaw clenched. He starts circling the RV, while Walt and Jesse are literally holding their breath inside. From the outside, it's just a beat-up bounder. On the inside, it's every answer to every question Hank has been chasing for seasons. The blue meth, the mysterious cook, the missing equipment from Walt's school, all of it is sitting a few inches from his face. But at the time, he still thinks he's hunting some anonymous desert tweakers. Watch how methodical he is. Hank doesn't just kick the door in. He starts talking probable cause out loud, trying to build a legal path to search. He checks the VIN, peers through the cracks, listens for movement. He's looking for any obvious clue, a chemical smell, a pipe, anything suspicious that lets him say, "I had to go in." That's the brilliant investigator. Inside, Walt is spiraling. He's whispering with Jesse, pacing, sweating, trying to invent a way to stop a DEA agent without exposing himself. Think about it. His brother-in-law is right there, seconds away from seeing the entire lab, and Walt can't run, can't fight, can't confess. He has to outthink Hank's process and Hank's ego at the same time. And the physical proximity here is insane. Hank presses his hand on the door. He hears voices. He knows someone is in there hiding. He even starts talking to them through the metal, like a cop in a hostage situation. He is one hinge, one shove, away from staring directly at Heisenberg's operation. But here's the thing. In Hank's head, Heisenberg is a faceless kingpin. Some cartel-adjacent mastermind, probably armed, probably ruthless. Not a middle-aged chemistry teacher who folds his own laundry. That mental image is a massive red flag he doesn't recognize. It locks him into the idea that whoever's in the RV is small time, just another step on the ladder. To be fair, nothing about the scared whispering he hears sounds like a criminal genius. It sounds like two idiots panicking, which fits his idea of Jesse perfectly. So he narrows in on Pinkman and completely filters out the possibility that Walt, the guy who rode along to a meth lab like it was a field trip, might be the one hyperventilating on the other side of the door. And then, the phone call. Pattern interrupt. Marie, fake crying about Hank Jr. in the hospital, weaponizing his family loyalty in real time. Walt has engineered the perfect emotional trap. Hank can either be the relentless cop and breach the RV, or the devoted uncle who drops everything for family. Hank chooses family. He walks away from the RV, from the lab, from the truth. Another missed opportunity, and the closest one yet. But that choice isn't the end of his blind spot. It's the blueprint. Because the next time family and Heisenberg collide, he won't get to just drive off. The fake phone call, the car crash that never happened. This is the moment Walter White doesn't just outsmart Hank Schrader as a cop. He hijacks him as a husband. Walt is cornered. The RV is trapped in the junkyard, Hank is outside, and Heisenberg is literally inches away from being unmasked. No more cat and mouse, no more blue meth mystery. If Hank opens that door, the entire operation, the saga, everything ends right there. So what does Walt do? He doesn't think like a criminal. He thinks like family. He calls Saul, gets Francesca to fake a panicked voice, and has her tell Hank that Marie's been in a serious car accident. Not a random emergency, not some vague "you need to come home." No, Marie. Car crash, hospital. It's a surgical strike on Hank's deepest value. Here's the thing. Walt knows exactly which button to push, because he's watched Hank live by that family first code from day one. Watch Hank's reaction. 1 second he's in full DEA mode, gun drawn, adrenaline up, barking orders at the junkyard guy. The next second, the phone rings, and you can see his entire identity flip. His voice cracks, he starts rapid-firing questions, and the RV, the lab, the case all vanish from his mind. In an instant, he's not Agent Schrader, he's Marie's husband. He doesn't hesitate, he doesn't secure the scene, he doesn't even peek inside the RV before he bails. He just sprints to the car and peels out, literally driving away from the closest physical proximity he will ever have to Heisenberg's lab. Think about it. Hank has spent seasons chasing this rolling cook site, and when he finally corners it, a single phone call pulls him off the scent. You could argue this is Hank at his best. Loyal, protective. To be fair, most people would do exactly what he does, but that's exactly why the move is so devious. Walt turns Hank's greatest strength into his fatal weakness on the case. Family over everything? Great. Heisenberg is family. Then comes the aftermath. Hank finds out the whole thing was a hoax, no crash, no hospital. Marie is fine and confused, and Hank is furious and embarrassed. He punches the elevator, he shuts down, he spirals into that panic attack. But here's the thing, he never seriously investigates who set him up or why. No phone records deep dive. No "who knew I was at that junkyard stakeout" conversation. No connecting this very targeted, very suspicious distraction to the Heisenberg investigation. It's right there as a giant red flag, and still, another missed opportunity. Pattern interrupt for you. What if Hank had just gone back? What if, instead of letting the shame and anxiety win, he'd returned to that RV within an hour? The show you're watching doesn't exist. Walt and Jesse are caught, the blue meth story ends in a dusty lot. This single moment crystallizes the core theme of Hank's failure. When family and the case collide, he always chooses family, and Walt counts on that. And the scary part? The next time Walt stages an emergency to get out of Hank's way, the stakes are going to be even higher, and that emergency shows up almost immediately. Gale Bodecker. On paper, he is everything Hank has been looking for. The perfect chemist, the perfect decoy. After Gale's murder, his apartment turns into a crime scene and a gift basket at the same time. Hank walks in and it's like stepping into a live-action version of his own Heisenberg theory. Lab glassware, high-end equipment, vegan tea, jazz vinyl, notebooks stacked with meticulous handwriting. You can almost feel Hank's energy spike. The case that nearly killed him? It's suddenly alive again. He starts combing through Gale's stuff. The notes, the purity calculations, the poetry scribbles, the obscure jazz CDs. Every shelf screams, highly educated, chemistry-obsessed meth cook. And think about it. This is the first time Hank has a fully formed person he can pin all that blue meth genius on. Not just a silhouette on camera, a name, a face, a lease. Here's the thing, Gale fits Hank's revised mental model almost too well. After the RV, after the gas mask from Walt's school, Hank has already shifted away from the idea of some cartel bruiser cooking in a shed. He knows Heisenberg has to be a nerd. Someone bookish, technically brilliant, probably socially awkward. Gale is all of that. But still safely outside the family circle. No awkward dinners. No backyard barbecues. To be fair, a lot of clues do point straight at Gale as a major player. His lab notes match the purity. His equipment matches the process. His apartment screams, "I spend my nights doing chemistry for fun." From Hank's perspective, it's almost too obvious not to be true. This is the guy, case closed, ego restored. But here's the thing, buried in that same notebook is a bigger clue, the WW inscription, the references to a mentor. The way Gale talks about being taught, not inventing this method himself. It's evident he's not the original Heisenberg. He's the star student, not the professor. And when Hank first sees WW, he barely flinches. He treats it like a fun little puzzle, not a red flag. He tosses out names, lands on Walter White as a joke, and we'll get to that scene in a second. But in that moment, the show stages one of the wildest near misses in TV history. Hank literally says the right name out loud and laughs it off. Hear me out. Gale's murder should have expanded the investigation, not narrowed it. The notebook proves there's someone above him. Someone smarter. Someone still out there. But still, another missed opportunity. Hank grabs onto the clean, convenient answer and ignores the loose thread labeled W. And the next time he pulls on that thread, it's going to happen in the most mundane place imaginable, with a book of poetry in his hands. And that loose thread finally shows up again in the most low-stakes setting possible. Hank's own bedroom. No lab, no crime scene, no danger. Just Hank, Walt, a bedspread, and the answer to the entire show sitting between them. The WW scene. This is the purest example of how close Hank came. He sits on the edge of the bed, flipping through Gale's lab notebook like it's just another file, and lands on the dedication, "To WW, my star, my perfect silence." He actually reads it out loud, almost casually, like he's sharing a fun little Easter egg with his brother-in-law. Then he does the bit. "You got me. Who do you figure that is? Woodrow Wilson? Willy Wonka? Walter White?" And he laughs. He literally says the name of the man who cooked the meth, in the same room as him, while holding the dead chemist's notebook, and treats it like a punchline. Think about it. The show doesn't whisper the truth here, it screams it. The initials match. The timing matches. The level of chemistry skill described in that notebook absolutely lines up with the guy who once gave Hank a full nerd-out lecture on meth purity in the car. But because it's Walt, because in Hank's head this is the weakest man he knows, Walter White automatically belongs in the joke column, not the suspect column. Now look at Walt. The reaction is instant. His face freezes, his throat tightens, and the stammer kicks in. He latches on to the only thing he can. "You got me, I'm Gale's star student." It's such a forced, awkward line that even on first watch you feel the panic under it. He's not amused, he's cornered. From an investigative standpoint, this is a massive behavioral red flag. A normal brother-in-law with nothing to hide laughs that off, makes a crack about being flattered, moves on. Walter does the opposite. He over-explains. He rushes to control the narrative. He literally forges a new story about his relationship to Gale in real time, right in front of a DEA agent. And Hank? He clocks none of it. To be fair, his brain is already parked on the Gale was Heisenberg square. Confirmation bias is doing all the heavy lifting. At the time, he thinks he's closing a case, not opening a new one. So the blue meth, the murdered chemist, the mysterious WW, and the nervous chemistry teacher all coexist in one scene without ever connecting in his mind. But here's the thing, if this were any other suspect, Hank would tear that moment apart. He'd replay the stutter. He'd question the star student story. He'd ask why this guy is suddenly sweating over a dead man's dedication. With Walt, he just laughs and moves on. Another missed opportunity. Hear me out. This is the thesis of the whole video distilled into 30 seconds. The truth is spoken out loud. It's written on the page. It's sitting on Hank's own bed. But his perception filter literally can't process Walter White Heisenberg as anything but a joke. And the tragic part? The universe is going to hand him the exact same initials again. Same letters, different book. Next time, he won't be laughing. Gale's notebook. This is the smoking gun Hank solves and then unsolves in the same breath. Because if you read those pages without bias, Hank basically closes the Heisenberg case years before that bathroom break. Look at what's actually in there. Gale isn't just doodling molecules. He's documenting a process that mirrors Walt's cook almost step for step. 99.1% purity, specific solvent choices, the exact same chemical shortcuts that explain why the blue meth looks the way it does in Hank's evidence photos. Hank has been staring at this mystery product for seasons, wondering what kind of genius chemist is behind it. Then he opens a lab notebook where someone reverse engineers that product with an almost identical method. That is not a cute coincidence. That is an obvious clue. And Gale keeps talking about a mentor, a teacher, someone who designed this perfect process that he's just honored to replicate. Now, to be fair, Hank does clock that. He knows Gale admired someone else. But here's the thing. He never seriously asks the most basic follow-up. Who around me could be that teacher? Think about it. Hank's brother-in-law is literally a chemistry teacher, a guy he's known for years, a guy he just watched quit his job, have a midlife crisis, disappear at weird hours, and show an oddly specific interest in meth chemistry at that first ride along. On top of that, Hank already knows Walt is connected to Jesse through the marijuana cover story. He knows Jesse is tied to Tuco, to the RV investigation, to the early blue meth. All those threads run right past Walt's front door. But when Gale writes about a chemistry mentor, Hank's mental suspect board does not light up Walt's face. He just walls that possibility off. This is where cognitive closure kicks in. Once Hank decides Gale is Heisenberg, the case feels done. The purity matches, the notebook matches, the crime scene matches. He's got a dead chemist and a bow on top. Why keep digging for a ghost mentor when the guy in front of you checks every box on paper? It's classic Hank. Strong instincts, but once he locks on, he does not like to unlock. Hear me out though, because this is another missed opportunity hiding in plain sight. Gale's pages don't just solve who cooked this batch. They solve who designed the entire operation. The constant deference to a superior mind, the way Gale calls himself a student, the nerdy, almost romantic dedication to WW at the front. That inscription alone should have triggered a second look at every WW Hank has ever joked about. Instead, Gale becomes the perfect decoy. The lab notes that should have pointed past him end up burying the real teacher, and that false resolution is exactly what makes the later shatter so brutal. Because when Hank finally sits on that toilet with a different WW in his hands, he's going to be forced to reopen every piece of Gale evidence he confidently closed, and see a completely different name written between the lines. And that brings us to maybe the cruelest twist of all. The day Hank basically invites Heisenberg into his war room and gives him a full briefing. Hank's home office. On the surface, it looks like a classic TV detective setup. You've got the corkboard packed with photos of blue meth, crime scene shots, Gale's smiling face, the RV in grainy surveillance stills, mugshots, addresses, scribbled notes, red string connecting dealers to distributors to mystery chemists. It's the Who is Heisenberg wall, and at the time, it feels like the safest place in the world to Hank. This is his territory, his puzzle, and who does he proudly show it to? Walt. He sits Walt down with a beer and walks him through everything. The blue product, the distribution tree, the dead ends, the RV as a mobile lab. Gale is the supposed mastermind. Hank vents about how close he is, how it's right there but just not clicking. To be fair, from Hank's perspective, he's just unloading on his brother-in-law, the meek chemistry teacher, who wouldn't last a day out there. Walt is the emotional support audience, the safe pair of ears. But here's the thing. From Walt's perspective, this is a progress report. Hank is literally telling him which clues hit, which ones missed, and where the investigation is blind. You can see it in Walt's face, the tight jaw, the shallow breathing. The way his eyes dart around the board just a little too long when they land on the RV photo or Gale's picture. Walt starts asking questions, very specific questions. He nudges Hank about Gale's capabilities, about how certain he is, about whether the blue meth after Gale's death really matches his work. He tries to steer Hank's focus back toward Gus, back toward anything that isn't a local chemist with teaching experience. It's subtle, but think about it. How many regular suburban dads can even follow this level of detail, let alone push the conversation into new angles? Yet Hank never blinks. He doesn't ask, "Why do you know so much about lab procedure?" He doesn't wonder why Walt is so invested, why this supposedly fragile cancer patient keeps circling back to technical points. Because in Hank's mind, Walt is harmless. That decision was made years ago, at the birthday party, at the ride-along, in every joke about Walt's underwear and minivan. And once Hank filed Walt under pathetic, every suspicious reaction just looked like anxiety or curiosity, not a red flag. Hear me out. This scene quietly flips the power dynamic. Hank thinks he's the hunter giving a status update to a bystander. In reality, the bystander is adjusting his hunting strategy in real time. The cop is talking, but the criminal is the one gaining actionable intel. And the wild part? This isn't even the closest Hank gets in that house. Because soon, Walt won't just be staring at the board, he'll be hiding evidence in the walls around it. Jesse Pinkman. On paper, he's the screw-up burnout kid. In reality, he's Hank's best lead to Heisenberg that he never fully trusts, never fully squeezes, and definitely never connects back to Walt. Think about it. Hank's history with Jesse is basically a highlight reel of almosts. First, the rooftop escape in the pilot. Hank drags Walt on that ride along, storms Crazy Eight's house, and who does he unknowingly chase off the roof? Walt's former student, the guy who will become Heisenberg's right-hand man. At the time, Jesse is just Cap'n Cook, a small-time meth head who got lucky enough to run. No big picture threat, no mastermind. Then you get the parking lot beatdown. Hank tracks the RV, gets played at the junkyard, and later takes out all that frustration on Jesse's face. It's brutal. But here's the thing, that beating is also when Jesse stops being just a nuisance and becomes a potential informant. Hank's guilt, the suspension, the lawsuit risk, it all pushes him back into that hospital room to apologize, and more importantly, to listen. In those later interrogations, Jesse sits across from Hank as both victim and goldmine. Hank correctly senses that Jesse is tied to something way bigger than low-level dealing. The RV incident alone is a massive red flag. A rolling lab tied to Jesse, tied to the blue. It's evident this kid isn't just buying from Heisenberg. He's inside the operation. Hank feels that. You can see it when he leans in, when he pushes Jesse about the mystery partner, when he offers protection. But still another missed opportunity. Because even when Hank knows Jesse sold weed to some high school teacher, even when he's literally heard Jesse say Mr. White, he never truly pushes that angle. He doesn't sit there and grill Jesse with, "Your chemistry teacher, what's his name?" Where is he now? The teacher-student history is right there. Walt and Jesse cross paths in front of Hank multiple times. Family barbecues, hospital visits, the whole thing. To be fair, none of those moments scream cartel meeting, but they are suspicious when you line them up. Why doesn't Hank go there? Simple. His mental casting is locked. Jesse is the loser, the junkie, the guy who keeps ending up in cuffs or in recovery. Walt is the square teacher, the cancer patient, the man who can barely hold a gun without looking like he's about to drop it. In Hank's mind, those two roles can't coexist with sophisticated criminal partners. Hear me out. Hank can imagine Jesse as a pawn of a genius, and he can imagine some faceless chemist as that genius. But he cannot imagine that genius being Walt. And that's the tragedy. Because in the end, it will be Jesse, the kid Hank half trusts, half depisses, who finally helps him confirm what his gut's been circling for seasons. But for that to happen, Hank's entire perception of Walt has to shatter first. And that break is coming a lot closer than he realizes. Because right when Hank's instincts are finally warming up, the Salamanca cousins step out of the shadows and basically flip his entire mental map of the case. The cousins, the hit. This is the moment the game board gets kicked over. Two silent cartel assassins crawl out of Mexico, draw skulls on a shrine to Heisenberg, and start walking toward Albuquerque like a horror movie. Suddenly, Hank isn't just chasing some mystery cook. He's the target. Think about it. Hank gets that anonymous warning call, spots the twins in the parking lot, and in pure adrenaline mode, he rams one with his SUV and barely survives the axe. From that second on, his investigation stops being theoretical. It's about survival, trauma, and cartel retaliation. Local cooks, small-time dealers, those feel like background noise compared to two Terminators in boots. And here's the thing, The cartel's obsession with Heisenberg doesn't make Hank think smaller. It makes him think bigger. Way bigger. If the Mexican cartel is sending their elite hitmen over the border because of this guy, Hank assumes Heisenberg must be a major player on their level, a rival boss, a top chemist embedded in their world, not a suburban dad with a Saturn and a car seat in the back. To be fair, from Hank's perspective at the time, that's not a crazy read. Powerful cartel, terrifying hitmen, blue meth flooding the Southwest. It's obvious, right? The threat must be coming from some hardened criminal with deep connections, not the guy who grills hot dogs in his backyard in khakis. But still, another missed opportunity, because the cartel's fear of Heisenberg is actually a clue. It screams that he's an outlier, someone they can't control, someone not from their system. Hear me out. If Heisenberg were just another cartel chemist, they wouldn't be praying to a shrine and sending the cousins to butcher him. They'd just reassign him or kill him quietly. The drama is the red flag. Instead, Hank takes that drama and points his gaze outward. He starts looking to Mexico, to bosses like Juan Bolsa, to structures and hierarchies and cross-border pipelines. His field of vision narrows to the big, flashy threat, and while he's scanning the horizon for cartel puppeteers, the actual mastermind is sitting 3 feet away at family dinners, refilling the guacamole. This is the cruel irony. The cousins and the cartel should have highlighted that Heisenberg doesn't fit their world, that he's some domestic anomaly, a talented ghost operating just outside their rules. Exactly like a high school chemistry teacher moonlighting as a drug kingpin. But Hank doesn't interpret it that way. His bias about what a real criminal looks like keeps Walt safely in the harmless box. And that's the larger pattern. Big, cinematic threats hijack attention. The cousins, the cartel, the hit on Hank, they're so loud that the quiet, domestic danger on his own couch fades into the background. Which is why the next set of clues, the ones that drag him back to the home front, hit so much harder when they finally land, and then everything stops. The hit on Hank isn't just a plot twist, it's a full-on hard reset of the investigation. 1 minute he's the loudest, most aggressive force hunting Heisenberg. The next, he's flat on his back, tubes in his arms, and the guy he's chasing is standing at his bedside bringing him flowers. Hank's recovery. This is the quietest and most devastating stall in the whole hunt. Physically, he's wrecked. Confined to a hospital bed, then a wheelchair, he's struggling to move his legs, fighting pain just to stand, and needing help to do basic things he used to take for granted. Psychologically, it's even worse. The macho DEA hero who took on the cartel is suddenly terrified to get out of bed. He's snapping at Marie, drowning in minerals, and burying his fear under sarcasm, because the alternative is admitting he feels completely powerless. Think about it. The guy who used to kick down doors can't even walk to the bathroom without a walker. That loss of mobility translates into a loss of identity. He doesn't feel like a cop. He feels like a burden. And when you don't feel like a cop, you don't chase big, scary ghosts like Heisenberg. This is where the case freezes. No more ride-alongs, no more fieldwork, no more late-night whiteboard sessions about blue meth. The investigation basically goes into cryosleep at the exact moment it should be heating up. Gus is expanding. Walt is leveling up from RV chaos to industrial superlab. But Hank? He's stuck at home obsessing over rocks and pretending they're not rocks. And while Hank is sidelined, Walt gets a massive advantage. Here's the thing. This lull is the safest window Walt ever has. He uses it to fully fold himself into Gus's operation, refine the product, and build an empire that's way beyond simple investigative steps, like check the high school chemistry teacher. By the time Hank is ready to think about Heisenberg again, Walt's no longer some guy cooking in the desert. He's a cog in a polished corporate crime machine. The family scenes make it worse. You get those subtly brutal moments where Walt visits Hank, plays the supportive brother-in-law, and listens to him vent about feeling useless. Walt's fetching beers, cracking gentle jokes, offering encouragement. Be fair, some of that concern is real, but it's also cover. Every time Hank sees Walt in that room, it reinforces the same image. Harmless, soft, non-threatening. The exact opposite of the cartel hitman who just tried to kill him. And hear me out. That emotional bond becomes its own kind of evidence filter. Any suspicious clue that points near Walt is going to bounce off that mental picture. Hank's trauma doesn't just slow him down, it hardcodes the bias even deeper, which is why, when Gale's notebook finally lands in his lap and drags him back into the hunt, he comes back sharper, more focused, more obsessive than ever, but still not sharp enough to cut through the one blind spot that matters most. Because the next clue he gets is so obvious, so on the nose, that you almost can't believe he misses it again. From Gale to Gus, this is where Hank finally locks onto a real kingpin, and still misses the man literally sitting at his dinner table. Gale's notebook points him toward a bigger operation. The purity, the equipment, the money trail. It all screams infrastructure. And right as Hank is ramping back up, the perfect suspect walks into frame. Gustavo Fring, the polite, soft-spoken owner of Los Pollos Hermanos who donates to the DEA, shakes everyone's hand and caters Hank's own office. Think about it. The guy is practically begging to be a twist villain. Hank starts with something simple. The blue meth is moving in bulk. It's showing up in cartel territory. Then he sees that Los Pollos trucks are tied to cartel activity, and suddenly the chicken man doesn't look so harmless. You can almost see the light bulb. Clean front, spotless reputation, massive distribution network. It's the exact pattern he's been chasing since the RV days, just on a corporate scale. And to be fair, Hank's instincts here are razor sharp. He clocks the way Gus presents himself, how over-the-top respectable he is, how he's always exactly where he's supposed to be. That in itself becomes a red flag. Hank's been around enough crooks to know that the loud, messy guys aren't the real bosses. The real bosses wear ties, sign paychecks, and cut ribbons at charity events. Here's the thing, he's right. Gus is a kingpin. He's absolutely nailed the architecture of the operation. The trucks, the restaurants, the shell companies, the cartel connection. But that success becomes its own trap. Once Hank has Gus as his big bad, the idea that Walt could be Heisenberg doesn't just seem unlikely, it feels absurd. Why would the mastermind be a failing high school teacher when you've got a criminal CEO right in front of you? So Hank pours everything into proving Gus is the mastermind. He's asking the right questions about distribution, money laundering, territory. But still, another missed opportunity. He barely asks the most obvious one. Who is actually cooking this 99% pure product? He assumes Gus is either the chemist or so directly responsible that the cook almost doesn't matter. Watch how the show plays with this. Hank gets the GPS on Gus's car. He tails him. He follows him straight to the industrial laundry. This is it. He's sitting in the car outside the exact building that houses the super lab. You know what's happening while Hank is staring at that brick wall? Walt is literally descending into the lab beneath it. The visual irony is brutal. Above ground, Hank sweating in his SUV, convinced he's circling the shark. Underground, his brother-in-law in a yellow hazmat suit, stirring the cook that made Gus worth hunting in the first place. And yet, at the time, Hank never even considers that gap between kingpin and chemist. That blind spot, the missing cook, is going to come back in a huge way once Gus is gone and the blue meth just keeps showing up. And that missing cook, the show doesn't just answer it with a name. It answers it with architecture, the laundry, the industrial front that literally sits on top of Heisenberg's empire. You've got trucks coming and going, forklifts beeping, workers sweating over mountains of hotel sheets. On the surface, it is the most boring place in Albuquerque. That's the point. The more mundane it looks, the less suspicious it feels. Underneath that concrete floor, though, is the crown jewel, Gus's gleaming superlab. Stainless steel tanks, meticulous ventilation, a pristine cook space that looks more like a pharmaceutical plant than a drug den. Think about it. Hank spends seasons obsessing over blue meth like it's some ghost in the desert, and the actual factory is humming away under a building he physically visits. Hank's surveillance is what brings him there. He tails Gus. He tracks his movements. He follows the kingpin right to the door of the laundry. He sits outside in his SUV, watching trucks, watching workers, watching Gus walk in like he owns the place. Because he does. Hank's instincts are firing. Something is off. But still, another missed opportunity. To be fair, Hank is a cop, not a psychic. He needs probable cause, not just a bad vibe about spin cycles. He can't just storm a legitimate business because his gut says secret meth lair. So he pokes around, asks a few questions, looks at the operation. On paper, it's clean. The workers are rehearsed. The paperwork is in order. Gus has spent years building an alibi so boring it's bulletproof. But here's the thing. The physical design of that place is basically Walt's entire life philosophy poured into concrete. Normal on top, criminal underneath. Suburban dad above, Heisenberg below. You've got this bland, fluorescent lit laundry where nobody would ever look twice, sitting right over a hidden world of chemistry, precision, and violence. Sound familiar? Walt is doing the same trick in his own house. PTA meetings, birthday parties, family dinners with Hank at the table. And under that, secret phones, late-night fugue states, stacks of cash hidden behind water heaters. The laundry is the architectural version of Walter White. Now imagine Hank pushes harder at the laundry. Hear me out. Say he insists on a full search, brings in a warrant, forces structural scans, dogs, something. The second that elevator to the lab is exposed, the whole game changes. Because the next obvious question is brutal. Who's cooking this? Gus is a businessman, not a chemist. Someone designed this lab. Someone is running it. And this is where the irony really lands. Hank keeps getting close to the infrastructure of Heisenberg's empire. The RV, the superlab, the distribution routes. He circles everything orbiting the cook, but his brain never jumps to the man he eats dinner with every week. He parks outside the laundry, staring at the building that hides Heisenberg's throne room, and still can't see the king. That blind spot is about to survive even Gus Fring's death. Gus dies in the most dramatic way possible. Half his face gone, superlab blown to pieces, the kingpin literally walks out of a room and collapses. On paper, that should be game over. The DEA's official story wraps it up with a bow. Gus Fring was Heisenberg's infrastructure. Gale was the genius cook. The Blue Empire is decapitated. Case closed, everybody go home. But here's the thing. Hank can't let it go. At this point, he's promoted, respected, finally getting credit for being right about Gus when everyone else was buying chicken and smiling. He should be satisfied. To be fair, most agents would be dining out on that win for the rest of their careers. But Hank's sitting in that house, legs still messed up, staring at files, and something just feels off. Think about it. The timing of the nursing home bombing, the sophistication of the superlab, the sheer volume and purity of the blue meth. Does that really track with Gale was secretly Heisenberg the whole time? And now that he's dead, it's all over? Hank doesn't consciously reject the narrative, but his instincts keep poking holes in it. Gale as Heisenberg starts to bug him. On the surface, it's neat. You've got a vegan, karaoke-loving chemist with a meticulous lab notebook and a PhD-level understanding of synthesis. Easy answer. But still, another missed opportunity. Because when Hank actually reads that notebook, it's evident this guy is a student as much as a teacher. He worships some unseen WW. He writes like a fanboy reverse engineering someone else's genius. Hear me out. If Gale is that obsessed with another chemist, and the Empire is this big, isn't it suspicious that the DEA just decides, yeah, he was the mastermind, moving on? Hank doesn't say it out loud, but you can feel the discomfort. The scale of the operation doesn't match the neatness of the conclusion. So he starts drifting back to old clues. Gale's notebook on his desk, the methylamine heist footage. That grainy video of an RV and a crew pulling off a highly technical chemical theft. At the time, Hank clocked it as professional, almost paramilitary. Now, with Gus gone, he quietly asks, who the hell pulled that off if our supposed Heisenberg is a dead lab rat and the boss just exploded? This is where his subconscious does more work than his conscious mind. He's not actively hunting a new Heisenberg yet, but he's rereading, rewatching, mentally reopening doors he thought were closed. The blue meth is still out there. The quality hasn't dipped. That alone should be a massive red flag. And all of that pressure, all that half-formed doubt is just sitting there, waiting for one tiny, domestic moment. No stakeout, no raid, no big bust. Just Hank Schrader, a bathroom, a book of poetry, and a name he's seen before. He already has the clues. All he needs now is to finally see the one person he's never really looked at. And that bathroom moment? It hits even harder when you remember how much money has already moved through this family without Hank ever really following the trail. The money. This is where it should all snapped into focus. After Hank gets shot, you watch him go from the confident DEA golden boy to a guy stuck in bed, staring at his own legs, staring at medical bills. Physical therapy, specialist visits, equipment, time off work. It's brutal. You feel the strain on Hank and Marie's marriage in every scene. She's sneaking expensive decor, he's furious and humiliated, and underneath all the yelling is one simple, obvious problem. They're broke. Now put that next to the Whites. Walt is supposedly a high school chemistry teacher who just quit his second job at the car wash. Skylar is doing books for Benique, which is not exactly Wall Street money. They've had a cancer diagnosis, a new baby, legal trouble, and Walt randomly moves out and back in. At the time, that should scream financial disaster. But somehow this family never really sinks. Here's the thing. While Hank is arguing about medical expenses, Walt is sitting on literal mountains of cash. First it stacks in duffel bags, then it's a crawl space, and eventually it's that storage unit scene where Skylar rolls up the door and shows him the absurd pile of money on a tarp. It's comical how huge it is. You look at that and think about it. This is the same guy Hank jokes with over beers about couponing and paying for. College. Hank hears gambling winnings and just accepts it. No bank records checked, no casino logs, no IRS flags. He doesn't even run the basic Day 1 DEA playbook. Follow the money. This is the same agent who can track cartel cash through shell companies, but when his brother-in-law suddenly has enough money to pay off medical debt, buy a car wash, and keep everyone afloat. Not suspicious. To be fair, the show gives you a reason. Hank's pride is a huge factor here. He hates feeling like a burden. When Walt offers to pay for his therapy, Hank resists, then finally caves, but you can see how much it kills him. The last thing he wants is to start poking around in the story that just pulled him out of financial hell. On some level, he doesn't want to risk finding out that his lifeline is dirty. But still, another missed opportunity. Hear me out. If this were any other case, Hank would be all over the discrepancy between income and lifestyle. Mysterious windfall, vague backstory, no paper trail? That's Investigations 101. The only reason he doesn't apply that rule here is because it's Walt. Family. The harmless chemistry teacher he's decided could never be Heisenberg, and that emotional blind spot is about to collide with something even harder to ignore than money. The RV, the rolling meth lab Hank chases right to the edge of the truth. And that emotional blind spot doesn't just warp how Hank sees Walt's money. It warps how he sees the person who knows Walt best, Skylar. Skylar's behavior, this is the silent alarm blaring right in Hank's face. And he still walks past it, think about it. Early on, those family dinners are awkward, sure, but in a normal, sitcom kind of way. Walt makes weird jokes, Hank brags about busts, Marie overshares. Skylar is engaged, a little snarky but present. She's the supportive wife, the one organizing the surprise party, the one defending Walt's pride when Hank teases him. Then it shifts, slowly at first, then all at once. By season 2 and 3, you get those same dinners, but Skylar looks like she's sitting next to a bomb. She's tense, evasive. Half the time she can't even look at Walt. When Hank and Marie come over after Walt moves back in, Skylar is ice cold at the table. She's chain-smoking, snapping at Walt, making these barbed little comments about gambling and secrets that hang in the air. The red flag is practically waving in Hank's mashed potatoes. For a seasoned investigator, that kind of sudden change should be suspicious on its own. Here's the thing. Hank has seen wives like this before. Not in his living room, but in victim interviews, in domestic calls, in cases where someone is trapped with a guy who's into something bad. A woman who goes from warm and open to visibly scared, cornered, and hostile toward her own husband? That's a clue, even if you don't know the crime yet. But at the time, Hank files it under marital drama and postpartum stress. He literally jokes about Walt needing to get his, and about Skylar being hormonal. To be fair, that's the story Skylar is trying to sell on the surface. But still, another missed opportunity, because Hank never applies his cop brain to his own family. Look at the car wash confession scene. Skylar pulls Hank aside, desperate, and starts spinning the gambling cover story. She hints that Walt's been hiding money, that it's big, that it's dangerous enough to blow up their lives. She is clearly terrified while saying it. Her voice is shaking. She's not proud of a jackpot. She's begging someone to believe her without asking too many questions. And Hank? He half buys it and half brushes it off. He warns her about tax issues, cracks a few lines, but he doesn't press. He doesn't say, "Skylar, are you safe?" He doesn't say, "What are you not telling me about Walt?" He doesn't even really interrogate the logistics of this supposed gambling empire. Hear me out. Skylar is actually trying to involve Hank, but indirectly. She can't say Walt is Heisenberg, so she says Walt is dangerous. And there's illegal money. That's the emotional version of a GPS tracker. It's soft intel. And Hank ignores it because he doesn't want to intrude too deeply into their marriage, and because his mental picture of Walt still doesn't match a man capable of serious crime. This is the core problem. Not all clues are forensic. Some of the biggest red flags are emotional, and when it comes to Walt and Skylar, Hank is too close, too casual, and too locked into his harmless Walt narrative to read them objectively. Which is exactly why, when the most obvious physical clue of all shows up later, it has to hit him in the most private, mundane place possible, his own bathroom. And that bathroom clue, the WW moment, it only hits Hank because he's finally alone with his thoughts. But the sad part is, Skylar had already staged a full-body alarm system months earlier, and he walked right past it. The pool, the breakdown. You remember this. Skylar steps outside during a family gathering, fully dressed, calmly walks to the edge of the White family pool, and just keeps going. No speech, no warning. She lowers herself under the water like she's trying to disappear in plain sight. It's not subtle. It's a silent scream right in front of Walt and the kids. The time, everybody treats it like a nervous collapse. A Skylar can't handle the stress moment. But think about it. This is a woman who has watched her husband transform into something she's genuinely afraid of. She can't say it out loud with Walt standing 10 feet away, so her body does the talking. That's your red flag. That's your something is very, very wrong with Walt clue. That one act sends her straight into Hank and Marie's house. Suddenly Hank has day in, day out exposure to Skylar in her rawest state. No Walt in the room, no kids to protect. Just Skylar chain-smoking in the Schrader kitchen, staring into space, clearly terrified of something she won't name. It's precisely a witness protection safe house, run by the guy who should be connecting all of this to Heisenberg. Listen to those conversations. She doesn't just seem sad, she seems trapped. She tells Marie she's afraid for the kids. She begs Hank and Marie to keep Walt Jr. and Holly longer. When Hank tries to frame it as marital problems and depression, she doesn't correct him, but her face does. The fear is obvious. She's not scared of being alone. She's scared of being with Walt. And here's the thing. Hank is a world-class interrogator who suddenly has a distressed, evasive family member living under his roof. Any other case, he'd smell something suspicious a mile away. He'd ask follow-ups. He'd gently box her in with questions. What exactly did Walt do? When did it start? Why do you think the kids aren't safe? But because it's Skylar, and because it's pathetic Walt, he downgrades it to a mental health crisis and leaves it there. To be fair, Hank is trying to be compassionate. He doesn't want to bulldoze a woman who just walked into a pool. But hear me out. A soft version of his real skill set would have cracked this wide open. Not slamming the table, just classic Hank. Circling back, noticing inconsistencies, treating her fear as evidence instead of a mood. Skylar is already breaking. One more nudge, one more Skylar. What aren't you telling me about Walt? And she might have spilled everything about the money, the meth, all of it. But still, another missed opportunity. His badge takes a back seat to being a brother-in-law, and the closest, safest path to Heisenberg walks us around his kitchen in a bathrobe and never gets questioned like a witness. And the crazy part? The next time Hank gets this close to the truth in his own home, it won't be Skylar doing the confessing. Because this time, Hank doesn't need Skylar to say a word. Cut to the garage. Hank in that lawn chair, beer untouched, the book still a ghost on his mind. Or he's in his office later, blinds half closed, the old blue meth case files spread out like a crime scene of his own mistakes. And now, every page has a new suspect, Walter White. This is where the methylamine heist video stops being a cool story and starts looking like a confession. At the time, it was just a wild, clever robbery. Some mystery crew jacks an entire tanker of methylamine, using a magnet and a train of distraction. Impressive, sure, but it was abstract, just these guys out there somewhere. Now? Think about it. Hank replays that footage with Walt in his head, and suddenly the whole thing screams. High school chemistry teacher with a death wish. The precision of the hoses, the way they manage the pressure, the timing down to the second. That's not some random street crew. That's somebody who understands chemistry, risk, and logistics at a level Hank has literally eaten dinner with. Here's the thing. Once Walt is on the table as Heisenberg, every frame of that tape is a red flag he missed. The scale of the operation matches the purity they've been chasing. The way the thieves avoid leaving traceable residue, that's the same kind of meticulous thinking Hank has praised in Walt when he talks about how brilliant his brother-in-law is with science projects and homemade car batteries. And then the absences start lining up. Hank scrolls through dates. The heist goes down. Where's Walt? Oh, right. That fugue state, that sudden trip, that cancer appointment that never quite had paperwork. To be fair, at the time, those were family excuses, not case notes. Now they're alibis that sound suspiciously like cover stories. Pattern interrupt. Imagine Hank actually laying the timeline out on a whiteboard. Walt's chemo, Walt's disappearances, Jesse going off the grid, the methylamine heist. It doesn't look random anymore. It looks coordinated. And the worst part? He realizes he had every one of those dates already. The pain here isn't just professional, it's personal humiliation. Hank's been bragging for seasons about hunting Heisenberg while the guy grills in his backyard. Now he's staring at a piece of evidence he's had for years and realizing he never once overlaid it with what he knew about Walt's capabilities. Former chemistry prodigy, resourceful, weirdly calm under pressure when things get truly bad. All of that was evident, he just never filed it under suspect. He filed it under family, but still, another missed opportunity. The clues didn't magically get clearer after the bathroom. Hank just finally allowed himself to put Walt in the suspect pool. Same video, same facts, different filter. And once that filter changes, even older cases start to rot from the inside. Because if Walt could pull off a methylamine heist like that, what else in Hank's case history suddenly looks a little too familiar? The bathroom, the book. This is the moment everything Hank has ever missed about Heisenberg comes crashing down on him. While he's just trying to use the toilet. He's at a family barbecue, safe space, burgers, beers, small talk. Hank steps into the White's bathroom, sits down, and casually reaches for some reading material like anybody would. He grabs Walt's copy of Leaves of Grass. No case file, no warrant, no suspicion. Just a bored DEA agent killing a minute. He flips it open. He sees Gail's handwriting. To my other favorite WW, it's an honor working with you. Fondly, GB. And you can almost feel the air leave the room. Because for you, the audience, the connection is obvious immediately. For Hank, it lands in slow motion. Think about it. He's seen WW before. He's literally joked about it with Walt, reading Gail's lab notes and going WW. Who do you figure that is? Woodrow Wilson? Willy Wonka? Walter White? And Walt, in the most suspiciously bold move, says, "You got me." At the time, Hank treats it like a cute moment, a nerdy teacher playing along, not a red flag. But here's the thing, that was still Hank in work mode, surrounded by evidence, case boards, his own ego about finally nailing Heisenberg through Gail. In that context, Walt can hide behind Hank's certainty that Gail is the guy. The joke gets filed away as nothing. On the toilet, the context is different. No badge, no partners, no performance. Just Hank, a book in his unguarded brain. He stares at the dedication, and you watch the mental Rolodex spin. Gail, the lab, the WW initials, Walt's weird reaction. The way Walt defended Gail, insisted Gail wasn't Heisenberg, got drunk and basically argued Hank's whole case back at him. Hear me out. Hank doesn't suddenly get smarter in this scene. He finally gets out of his own way. The evidence is literally in Walt's house, in his hand, in Gail's handwriting. There's no plausible chain where this book should exist with that inscription, unless Walt is the other favorite WW. This isn't a hunch. It's physical, intimate proof. To be fair, it had to be this personal to crack him. A lab notebook at the office can be rationalized. A suspicious reaction can be chalked up to stress. But a gift from Gail, addressed to WW, sitting in Walt's bathroom, that bypasses every bias Hank has built. It's not some mysterious mastermind out there. It's his brother-in-law's reading material, and the tragedy hits instantly. You see it on his face. Hank realizes he hasn't just been chasing Heisenberg. He's been having beers with him, letting him hold his newborn niece, sending his own family to live under the same roof as the guy behind the blue meth. He also realizes the case was solvable years ago. The gas mask from Walt's school, the RV, the $500,000 in cash joke. Another missed opportunity, over and over, because he refused to put Walt in the suspect pool. And once Hank stands up from that toilet, the whole show shifts. Because now Heisenberg isn't just a case file. He's family, and Hank has to decide what to do about that. Next, we see exactly how fast Hank goes from denial to full-blown secret investigation, and how even then Walt almost slips away again. From brother-in-law to prime suspect, it happens in the span of a toilet flush. You watch Hank in that bathroom and his body gives out before his brain can even catch up. His breathing spikes. His hand starts shaking. The room tilts. The sound design cranks up the toilet flush like a jet engine, because that's the moment his old image of Walt literally goes down the drain. He's not just having a panic attack. He's physically trying to reconcile two totally incompatible files in his head. Walt, the pathetic chemistry teacher, and Heisenberg, the monster I've been chasing for years. Think about it. Hank has stared at crime scene photos, blue meth samples, Gail's lab notes, the WW inscription, a whole wall of clues. None of that made him crumble. But one paperback in a bathroom does. That's how deep the denial ran. His body realizes the truth before he consciously admits it. And once he does admit it, the flip is instant. The second he steps out of that bathroom, he's not looking at Walt as family anymore. He's looking at him as a target. Every laugh, every barbecue, every aw shucks moment suddenly feels suspicious. The time Walt joked about $500,000 in cash in that duffel bag, not so funny now. The second cell phone, the random disappearances, the staged car crash when Hank wanted him to plant a GPS on Gus. All those things he waved away at the time come roaring back in like a highlight reel of red flags. Here's the thing. Hank's investigative brain had always been sharp. It was his emotional filter that was broken. Once that filter shatters, he finally does what he should have done years earlier. He doesn't confront Walt right away. He plays it cool. He walks back to the table, pretends he's just a little under the weather, and finishes the family hangout like nothing happened. That fake smile is brutal, because you know he's already mentally opening a case file on his brother-in-law. Then the quiet investigation starts. Hank pulls Walt's DEA file. He looks at hospital records, treatment dates, work schedules. He starts lining up Walt's supposed chemo appointments with major Heisenberg events. To be fair, this is exactly what a good agent should do. But still, another missed opportunity. Because this exact cross-checking could have nailed Walt, back when the gas mask from the desert was traced to his school. He digs into finances too. Walt's teacher salary, the car wash, the medical bills, none of it adds up. Hear me out. Hank is basically running the follow the money, follow the timeline playbook he's used on every other cartel target. The only difference now is that he's finally willing to put Walt's name in the suspect column. And that's the bitter irony. The moment Hank drops his macho idea of Walt as harmless, the puzzle almost solves itself, which raises the real question we're about to dig into. How early could he have cracked this if he'd just seen Walt clearly? Next, we're going back to the beginning, clue by clue, to see just how close Hank actually came, long before that bathroom door ever closed. So if seeing Walt clearly is the key, you need a way to judge every clue Hank missed. Not all misses are equal. Some are understandable blind spots. Others? Those are career-defining facepalms. Think about it as two columns. On one side, you've got the early, soft clues, vibes, coincidences, stuff that only looks obvious in hindsight. On the other, you've got hard evidence that practically has follow-up on this stamped across it. The ride along sits firmly in the forgivable column. Hank cracks a dark joke about easy meth money at Walt's birthday. Walt tags along to a bust, stares at the lab a little too long. Suspicious to us because we know what's coming. But at the time, your mild-mannered, underpaid chemistry teacher brother-in-law being curious about a drug lab is not exactly probable cause. Same with the second phone rumor early on. Marie mentions it, Skylar gets paranoid, Hank laughs it off. To be fair, lots of people hide things from their spouses that have nothing to do with running a drug empire. You don't jump straight from maybe he's cheating to he's building a cartel. That leap only feels obvious after the reveal. But here's the thing. Once the blue meth shows up and bodies start dropping, the standard changes. Those mid-series clues aren't just vibes anymore. They're files, lab reports, physical objects Hank touches. The gas mask and missing school equipment are the first big ones. Hank finds a gas mask at the Desert Cook site. It traces back to Walt's high school. He even goes there, stands in that lab, talks to the staff. A professional chemist, a bunch of missing gear, a unique high-grade product on the street. That's not soft. That's a real lead. And yet Hank never seriously sits down and says, who here could actually cook this? But still, another missed opportunity. Then you've got Gail and the WW dedication. Hank literally reads to WW my star, my perfect silence out loud in front of Walt. Walt's panic deflection, the awkward joke about Walt Whitman, the way he overreacts when Hank suggests Gail might be Heisenberg. It's all right. There, hear me out. A cop who isn't emotionally tied to Walt at this point at least flags that as weird and keeps digging. The RV junkyard standoff is even worse. Hank tracks the rolling lab, corners it, knows it's connected to Heisenberg. Walt is physically inside the RV, manipulating him through that fake phone call about Marie being in the hospital. Hank buys it instantly. Overconfidence in his read on Walt plus emotional panic equals the lab getting crushed in front of him. Each category exposes a different blind spot. Early on, it's emotional loyalty and family bias. He just can't map criminal mastermind onto Walt. Later, it's cognitive bias and sheer ego. Hank trusts his instincts so much that when evidence brushes up against his idea of who Walt is, he bends the evidence, not the idea. Next, we're going to stress test those fatal misses one by one and ask the brutal question. What actually happens if Hank doesn't look away? So let's stress the biggest miss of all, the RV in Old Joe's junkyard. This isn't just a close call. This is Hank Schrader standing one sheet of metal away from the truth he's been chasing for years. From Hank's perspective, this is a dream lead. He's tracked the rolling lab. He's got plates, informants, a pattern. He walks into that maze of rusted cars and there it is, the beat-up bounder that matches his Heisenberg clue board. He circles it. He hears the faint thump inside. His instincts are screaming that someone is in there. You can almost see it on his face. This is it. But here's the thing. At the time, Hank doesn't quite have probable cause. No active cook, no visible smoke, no drugs in plain sight. Just a very suspicious RV, a very stubborn junkyard owner, and a very loud gut feeling. And because it's Walt's car, in a way, his brain quietly files that as family adjacent, not cartel adjacent. Think about it. Hank actually does a lot right here. He locks the gate. He calls out commands. He tries to flush whoever's inside. He even starts to improvise a legal workaround by claiming the RV is a dwelling, which would give him one set of rules, then a vehicle, which would give him another. To be fair, that's some creative DEA lawyering on the fly. But still, another missed opportunity. What could he have done differently? He could have called for backup and a warrant team instead of trying to cowboy it solo. He could have pressed Old Joe harder, stalled him, or even detained him while a judge signed off. He could have just sat in his truck, engine off, and waited. Walt and Jesse are trapped. No food, no water, nowhere to run without walking straight past a DEA agent. If Hank opens that door, game over. He arrests Walt and Jesse on the spot. Inside, he finds the cook setup, precursor chemicals, gas masks traced back to Walt's school, maybe even residue that links to the blue meth on his desk. The mystery chemist is no longer an abstract genius. He's his brother-in-law in an apron. Run that alternate timeline for a second. No Walt, no Jesse, no RV. The Gus Superlab never becomes a thing because Gus doesn't get his star cook. The cousins never come for Hank because there's no Heisenberg to avenge. So no shooting in the parking lot, no trauma, no PTSD spiral. There's no Gale decoy, no lab notebook, no awkward W joke, no bathroom epiphany years later. And absolutely no desert showdown with Walt in Ozymandias. Hank lives. His career probably skyrockets off the Heisenberg bust. But here's the cruel twist. The reason he walks away is the same reason he's been missing clues all along. Family loyalty and pride. That fake emergency phone call about Marie in the hospital? Hank doesn't question it for a second. He bolts. His love for his wife overrides the case, and Walt weaponizes that blind spot perfectly. Hear me out. One decision in that junkyard, shaped by how Hank sees himself as a protector of his family, keeps Heisenberg alive, and it sets up every brutal clue he'll miss next. That junkyard standoff isn't the only time Hank has the truth right in front of him and walks away. The bedroom. Gail's notebook. WW. This is the second big pivot where a slightly different Hank blows the whole thing open. Think about it. Hank is literally sitting on Walt's bed, flipping through the lab notes of the man he thinks is Heisenberg. He lands on that inscription, "To WW, my star, my perfect silence." It's weird. It's intimate. It's a giant red flag. And instead of following the suspicion, he turns it into a joke. But hear me out. Imagine Hank doesn't go for the Walter White gag. Imagine he sees Walt's face twitch, hears that nervous little laugh, and his cop brain actually stays on. The tone shifts. He closes the notebook. He looks at Walt and quietly asks, "So, how did this guy know you?" Right there, the whole dynamic changes. Walt now has to explain Gail. He has to explain why this supposed criminal mastermind wrote a borderline love letter to a high school chemistry teacher. Even a basic follow-up, where did you meet? How close were you? Why are your initials in a dead chemist's murder book? Would have been enough to keep the clue alive instead of letting it die as a punchline. And if Hank takes it seriously, he runs a simple background check. Walt's education, his gray matter past, his reputation as a gifted chemist who somehow ended up teaching bored teenagers. Combine that with Gail's poetic devotion and scientific hero worship, and it becomes pretty evident this isn't some random acquaintance. This is a guy who clearly sees Walt as a mentor, maybe even a partner. For a DEA agent working a blue meth case, that's not just interesting. That's suspicious. Here's the thing, once Hank has that itch, his whole investigative style kicks in. He could quietly tail Walt after school, like he did with Jesse. He could pull Walt's financials and notice the sudden payoff on the house, the medical bills that don't quite add up, the car wash purchase. He might even cross-check the timing of Walt's supposed treatments with major Heisenberg events and see the double life pattern forming way earlier. Now plug that into the timeline. If Hank starts digging while Walt is still cooking for Gus, he's not just catching a lone cook. He's stepping into a corporate drug empire. A serious look at Gale leads to Madrigal, to Los Pollos Hermanos, to the superlab under the laundry. Instead of a bathroom epiphany, you get a mid-series explosion. Hank confronting Walt while Gus is still in play, cartel tensions still bubbling, everyone armed and paranoid. That kind of early exposure doesn't just end Walt. It potentially triggers a completely different cartel war, with Hank in the blast radius from day one. But still, another missed opportunity. And it's not because the evidence wasn't there. It's because Hank cannot picture Walter White as the kind of man who inspires fanatical loyalty in someone like Gale. To be fair, would you look at Season 1 Walt and think Secret Drug Messiah? The scary part is, this isn't even the last time Hank ignores WW. The next time he sees those initials, he's on the toilet. He sees WW, and finally, everything snaps into place. But think about it for a second. That's not the only way Hank could have gotten there. What if the real smoking gun wasn't a book in the bathroom, but a breakdown in the backyard? The pool scene. Skylar walking slowly into the water at the birthday party, with Hank and Marie watching in total confusion. At the time, Hank treats it like awkward family drama he'd rather not touch. But imagine an alternate version where the DEA agent in him doesn't back off. He waits. He lets the chaos settle. Then he sits down with Skylar, not as the joking brother-in-law, but as the guy who's interrogated cartel hitters. He doesn't say, "So what's up with Walt?" He says, "Sky, what are you afraid of? Are you safe? Are the kids safe?" Different question, totally different door. Because here's the thing, Skylar's not melting down because of gossip. She's terrified of Walter. She's already seen the money. She's already felt the menace. You can feel it in how she sends the kids away later, how she keeps Walt at arm's length even when she's technically on his side. If Hank had framed it as a safety issue instead of marital drama, she might have cracked. Not all at once, sure. But maybe she admits Walt has cash that makes no sense. Maybe she hints he's involved with dangerous people. Maybe she repeats that line she gives Marie later. Someone has to protect this family from the man who protects this family. You're telling me Hank wouldn't hear that and get a chill? Now push it further. Hear me out. Picture Skylar actually confessing. The car wash, the gambling lie, the piles of cash, the fact that Walt vanished for days and came back different. Hank's first reaction is probably pure disbelief. Walt? The sad guy who passed out at the barbecue? Then anger, because if this is true, he's been made a fool of in his own house. Then denial, where he tries to convince himself Skylar is exaggerating or having some kind of episode. But still, another missed opportunity turns into something else. A forced re-evaluation of every obvious red flag he's laughed off. The gas mask from Walt's school, the heavy duffel bag, the second cell phone. The kids living with him for months because of the fighting. Suddenly it's all too suspicious to ignore. Emotionally, this path destroys Hank. It means his brother-in-law is a criminal, his sister-in-law has been living in fear, and his house guests weren't distressed parents, they were victims. To be fair, that's exactly why he never pushes this hard in the show. He doesn't want to see his family as potential victims or perpetrators. His blind spot isn't just procedural, it's personal. But if Skylar had talked, you probably don't get a desert showdown with neo-Nazis. You get controlled arrests, witness protection, maybe even a shot at keeping everyone physically alive. Less cinematic, way safer. And this is the pattern with Hank. Every route to Heisenberg runs straight through his living room. And he keeps choosing not to walk through the door, because even when he finally does listen to family, it's not Skylar, it's someone else. Because even when he finally does listen to family, it's not Skylar, it's someone else. And this is where we have to pull back from the board and look at the writer's hands. Hank's misses don't happen because the show forgets. He's a good cop. They happen because the show remembers it, constantly. His near misses are not plot holes, they're pressure valves. They keep the tension cranked while still feeling like something a real, emotionally messy human would absolutely do. Think about it. On paper, Hank should crack this case in Season 1. He has the gas mask traced back to Walt's school. He knows the blue meth is insanely pure and probably made by a pro-chemist. He literally has a brother-in-law who is a pro-chemist at that exact school. From a distance, it looks ridiculous that he doesn't connect those dots. But here's the thing, the writers never make Hank dumb. Professionally, he's a shark. He nails Tuco. He hunts down the RV. He follows the methylamine trail. He works the Gale angle like a pro. Blind spot only shows up when the clues cross into family territory, the moment evidence would force him to see Walt as anything other than pathetic and harmless. His brain quietly reroutes. That balance is deliberate. You watch Hank in cartel cases and he's brilliant, intuitive, borderline reckless in a way that actually gets results. But put Walt in the frame, suddenly the most obvious red flag starts to look like a weird coincidence. The gas mask from Walt's school, the heavy duffel bag, the second cell phone, Skylar kicking Walt out and sending the kids away for months. Each one could shatter his image of Walt, so each one gets softened into something he can live with. Every missed clue is doing double duty. Plot-wise, it keeps Walt in play. Thematically, it's about the danger of underestimating people, the lies we tell ourselves about family, and how ego quietly edits reality. Hank's macho self-image needs Walt to be the weak one. To be fair, that's part of why their dynamic is so funny early on. But still, another missed opportunity. That joke about $500,000 in cash only lands because Hank's ego refuses to see Walter as the kind of man who could actually say that and mean it. And don't forget, you're cheating. You're seeing both shows at once. You watch Walt cook in the desert, then cut straight to Hank investigating the same cook site. You know the RV is a rolling lab. You know Gale is a decoy. You know WW is not Walt Whitman. From your seat, the answers are screaming. From Hank's, they're just noise mixed in with 100 other cases. That's why the bathroom reveal hits so hard. We've watched him circle the truth for seasons, always inches away, always pulled back by bias and love and pride. When it finally clicks with that leaves of grass moment, it doesn't feel like the writers flipped a switch. It feels like Hank finally earned the right to see what was in front of him the whole time. And once he sees it, the story changes. Because now we get to watch what Hank does when the blind spot is gone. And once he sees it, the story changes. But the thing you really have to understand is why it took that long. Because this isn't just a detective missing clues. It's two egos building a cage around the truth. Start with Hank's self-image. In his mind, he's the alpha in every room, the protector, the guy who kicks down doors and sees through everyone's lies. That's not just bravado for the office. That's how he walks into Walt's house, into family dinners, into that birthday party where he jokes about easy money and meth. He's the hero, Walt's the audience. So when he pegs Walt as meek, bumbling, emasculated, that becomes gospel. Admitting he misjudged Walt wouldn't just mean I missed a clue. It would mean my whole read on people is broken. For a guy like Hank, that's almost worse than getting shot. And Walt sees that. He weaponizes it. Think about it. Every time Hank is around, Walt leans harder into the role Hank already assigned him. He stammers. He plays the clueless chemistry teacher. He acts terrified of violence, of confrontation, of Hank's own job. That backyard scene where Hank fires the gun and Walt jumps like a scared rabbit isn't just character, it's camouflage. Here's the thing. Heisenberg only works because Walter White is so convincing. When Hank finds the gas mask from Walt's school at the desert cook site, that's a massive red flag. A professional chemist, access to equipment, a sudden change in behavior at home. But at the time, Hank's mental file on Walt is so locked in that he never seriously runs, "What if it's my brother-in-law?" as a real possibility. And every time Hank dismisses something like that, it feeds the loop. Walt notices. When Hank laughs off the duffel bag and Walt jokes $500,000 in cash, Walt is basically speed-running a confession just to test the mask. Hank's reaction tells him everything. This guy will never see me as a threat, so Walt gets bolder. The RV investigation is the same pattern. Hank is literally pounding on the door of Walt's rolling lab. It's so obvious to us it's almost painful. But still, another missed opportunity. Hank buys the phone call about Marie in the hospital because, to be fair, who imagines the man hyperventilating next to him is the mastermind he's hunting. Each miss reinforces both of them. Hank's ego says, "I'd know if it were Walt." Walt's ego says, "I'm smarter than the DEA. Hear me out." That's the emotional core of the middle seasons. Two men locked in a relationship where their flaws protect them, right up until those same flaws destroy them. And that's why the bathroom scene hits so hard. Leaves of Grass doesn't just give Hank evidence. It shatters his self-image. The clues aren't abstract anymore. They're in his hands, signed WW. So what does a man like Hank do when his whole identity as the alpha, the protector, the one who sees through everyone, suddenly turns on him? Because the moment he steps out of that bathroom, the feedback loop is gone, and the real hunt finally begins. When Hank walks out of that bathroom, everything we've just gone through snaps into focus. Because the truth is, this wasn't a sudden revelation. It was the final piece in a puzzle that had been sitting on his desk, in his car, and at his dinner table for years. Think about it. The physical evidence alone was screaming at him. The gas mask at the first cook site traced back to Walt's school, the missing lab gear from the chemistry department, the RV that matched Jesse's, turning up again and again as this mysterious rolling lab. Every time Hank clocked the clue, took it seriously for a second, and then let it drift because it didn't fit his idea of who could be behind all this. Then you layer in the behavioral red flags. Walter's sudden interest in the DEA ride-along, his constant absences that lined up a little too cleanly with blue meth activity, the second cell phone that Skylar literally shoves in Hank's face as proof something is off. On paper, it's obvious. A guy with cancer, under financial pressure, brilliant in chemistry, vanishing at odd hours? Suspicious doesn't even begin to cover it. But here's the thing. Hank isn't just missing what Walt does. He's missing what everyone around Walt is telling him. Skylar's fear when she kicks Walt out. Her later breakdown under Hank's own roof, sending the kids away for months because she thinks they're not safe with their father. Jesse's weird, unspoken connection to Walt that keeps popping up at the worst possible times. None of those are hard facts in a file, but they're giant relational red flags. And inside that pile, you've got the three big almosts. The RV junkyard standoff, where Hank is literally feet away from Walt and Jesse, stalling him on the other side of a thin metal wall. The WW joke over Gail's notebook, when Hank basically solves the case out loud and then laughs it off, because, to be fair, the idea of Walt as Heisenberg feels ridiculous to him. And Skylar's breakdown, where Hank knows something is deeply wrong with Walt, but still can't push past midlife crisis and infidelity to drug kingpin. Each one of those is another missed opportunity. None of them alone is a smoking gun. But together, hear me out. That's a pattern any other version of Hank Schrader would bulldoze straight through. The core problem isn't that Hank is a bad cop. The show bends over backwards to prove he's a great one. The problem is that he's a good brother-in-law, locked into a story where Walter White is weak, harmless, and in need of protection, not surveillance. That story blinds him longer than any clever alibi Walt ever invents. So as we head into the final stretch, try something on. Rewatch Breaking Bad, but from Hank's point of view. Ask yourself, scene by scene, with what he knows at the time, would you have seen Heisenberg sitting at that backyard barbecue? And when you do that, when you really lock into Hank's point of view, something hits you. The bathroom scene stops being a clever twist and turns into a horror movie jump scare that's been loading for 5 seasons. The bathroom, the book, the realization. In that moment, it's not just that Hank finally solves the case. It's that Hank's entire identity snaps in half. He's the guy who protects his family and hunts monsters. Suddenly, the monster is family. Think about it. Every backyard barbecue, every "my brother-in-law's a chemistry teacher" joke, every time he dragged Walt into a DEA story, it all rewrites itself in his head in one flush. Here's the thing. Hank isn't just processing, "my brother-in-law cooks meth." He's processing, "I've been wrong about the person I love and wrong about the job I'm best at." That's why he has a panic attack in the car. That's why he can't even walk straight leaving the house. You're watching a guy realize that the story he's told himself about who he is and who Walt is has been fake this whole time. And that's what has set Hank versus Heisenberg so haunting. The show is basically asking you, how many comforting stories are you clinging to right now? Hank builds this narrative where Walt is weak, harmless, and in need of protection. Skylar builds a version where Walt is at least trying to provide. Even Walt builds a story where he's doing it for the family. All of them are staring at suspicious clues, and all of them bend reality to protect the version of Walt they need. To be fair, that's very human. You do it. I do it. Your friend who just has bad luck with partners does it. You get a red flag, you get an obvious contradiction, and you go, well, at the time it made sense. Hear me out. Hank ignoring the gas mask from Walt's school is not that different from you ignoring that coworker's sketchy DMs because you don't want to rock the boat. But once Hank knows, it's over. The same loyalty that blinded him now locks him in. He can't unknow it, and he can't live with it. That's why the desert showdown feels so tragically inevitable. Of course he goes after Walt alone. Of course he won't back down, even when Walt begs. The part of him that missed all those clues is the same part that now refuses to compromise. That's why the bathroom and the desert stick in your brain. They're not random set pieces. They're the final, brutal payoff for every missed opportunity and every joke Hank ever made at Walt's expense. So ask yourself, what are your Hank moments? When have you had all the evidence, all the clues, and still chosen the safer story? And what happens if, one day, your version of reality explodes just as violently as his did? So here's the thing, you don't have to change the story to see a completely different show. All you have to change is whose eyes you're watching through. Next time you hit play on Breaking Bad, try watching it as Hank Schrader versus an invisible suspect, instead of Walter White becomes Heisenberg. Start with the pilot, the birthday party, the ride-along, that dumb little joke Hank cracks about easy money and meth. Think about it. You're watching the exact moment he accidentally inspires the Empire he'll spend the rest of the series chasing, while Walt stands right there absorbing every word. Every laugh at Walt's expense suddenly feels like a clue he's missing about the danger brewing in his own backyard. Then jump to the RV in the desert and the junkyard showdown, the RV incident. This was another huge missed opportunity. On rewatch, track every time Hank is literally inches away from the rolling lab, from the gas mask traced back to Walt's school to Walt fake cuffing outside the RV like the world's worst improv actor. At the time, it plays as tense and kind of funny. When you know the truth, it's brutal. You can practically feel the universe screaming the answer at him. Gail's notebook is the same deal. Revisit those scenes where Hank is geeking out over Gail's notes at the kitchen table. The WW initials. The way Walt freezes, then jokes his way out of it. To be fair, it sounds like a stretch on first watch. But here's the thing. Once you're tuned into Hank's blind spot, every awkward dinner, every barbecue, every offhand, WW joke feels loaded with dramatic irony. You know Hank is smart enough to solve this. You also know he's emotionally incapable of putting Walt in that Heisenberg box. Until the bathroom. And when you finally get to the bathroom reveal again, watch Hank's face like it's the climax of a detective movie you've already solved. Because now, you have. The clues were always evident. The lab equipment, the blue meth, the RV, the notebook, the W inscription in the birthday book. All the suspicious behavior he rationalized away as midlife crisis or cancer stress. On rewatch, it's almost unforgivable how much he missed. So I want to hear from you. Drop a comment. Which missed clue do you think is the most unforgivable? The RV, the gas mask, the WW moment? Or is there a smaller red flag where you think, yeah, Hank should have solved it right there? And if you like looking at Breaking Bad this way, through these character blind spots, stick around. We've got deep dives into Gus Fring's perfect mask, Skyler's moral spiral, Jesse's transformation from burnout to broken conscience, all of it. Hear me out. This show only gets better the more you pick at it. Because the truth is, the clues were always there. For Hank, for us. The real question is whether we're willing to see what's hiding in plain sight, in our own stories, or if we wait for our version of that bathroom moment to finally force us to look.